Every year we get into July and Darren and I get phone calls, I didn't get all my weeds killed in corn, or I've still got weeds left out there in soybeans. What can I do now? Yes, it's very late, but you still have a few options. We're going to talk about that today. All right, let's start with corn. This late in corn, the corn's basically at tassel or really close to it. So what we would encourage you to do is just wait until you have brown silk, and then you could go out there with drop nozzles. You can't just spray over the top, but you can use drop nozzles, and you can spray 2,4-D. Now, I will be honest with you, would I do that? Probably not. It'd probably have to be an absolute disaster out there for me to do that, and here's the reason why. When you have very late season weeds in corn, think about those as a cover crop, okay? They're not gonna hurt this late in the season. They're not gonna hurt your yield. What they can do though, and the reason why a lot of people like to spray, is because you're gonna really build up that weed seed bank if those weeds happen to go to seed. And I will just tell you, in my experience, if you let weeds go to seed, then a lot of times you're fighting that hard for 5 years. You will spend extra money for 5 years in a row. So in some cases, it can be worth it to spray late. But this is why we always talk so much about, hey, do a great job with pre-emerge herbicides, use really good post products, leave yourself some residual, so you're not worried about this. But again, really about the only good option is to go out there with drop nozzles so you can get down and get some coverage on the weeds using 2,4-D after brown silk.
And really, Brian, this has become less of an issue the last few years, in my opinion, because there have been more residual herbicides being used, even residual herbicides being used in crop post-emerge, versus if you go back even 5 or 10 years ago, there's still quite a few guys that were using, well, 1 or 2 shots of Roundup with 0 residual out in the corn, and we're seeing a lot more weed escapes. The other thing that we get into with late weed escapes is, will it affect harvestability in corn? That's generally not a problem.
Okay, let's turn to soybeans now. The good news here with soybeans is you have some additional options that you didn't a few years ago. So for example, 2,4-D, Liberty, dicamba, Roundup. Okay, besides conventional herbicides, you got to look at what can I do with these other herbicides. So let's talk about that real quick. With the other herbicides, first of all, Liberty and Roundup, you can go ahead and spray through up until full flower. So you might be right there, you might not quite be there, but all I know is if you still have time, you don't have much time. So you better get your Roundup and Liberty sprayed. If you spray Roundup and Liberty, Roundup or Liberty, obviously you have to have the right trait. But keep in mind, they're two totally different herbicides. Roundup, you want low water volume. Liberty, you want high water volume. Roundup, you want bigger droplets. Liberty, you want smaller droplets. Roundup, you probably want some ammonium sulfate in there. That's going to help you in most cases. Liberty, it absolutely has to be in there. So anyway, they are definitely different products. In terms of the 2,4-D and the dicamba, now dicamba, in most states, you are limited by a date, whether it's June 20th or June 30th, whatever, and you are certainly limited by 45 days after planting. So you have to be real careful with that dicamba label. Chances are you're done spraying that already. But 2,4-D, you can spray that through R2. So until you start seeing pods in the field at R3, you're good to go on the 2,4-D. And the 2,4-D we're talking about here is in list 1. Now in list 1 would be a little bit like Roundup or dicamba. We want to have bigger droplets. You don't need a tremendous amount of water, but you're going to have the best results spraying smaller weeds. So the calls we get in July are typically, hey, I got great big weeds, and I just say, look, you're off label. If you want to try some 2,4-D at that point, you certainly can. It'll curl the weeds up, might not kill them. It'll probably help, but it's not going to totally solve your problem unless those weeds are actually on label, usually 2 to 4 inches tall.
Well, that's the problem. Everyone's looking for a rescue product, and there really aren't any rescue products. Every one of these herbicides wants to see weeds in a 2 to 4 inch tall window. Well, when you've got foot tall or 2 foot tall weeds, that can be a big challenge. Nothing is going to be 100% at weed control at that stage. Now, we've got other weeds that could be popping up in soybean fields, like volunteer corn, for example. There's more volunteer corn in 2020 in some of these fields than I've seen in a while. And many farmers have already made that early application, but there was more of that seed out in the field that's popped through. Now that volunteer corn is really big, and I know there's quite a few farmers that are saying, you know, I'm just gonna let it go. It's not worth trying, but you could still use some of the volunteer corn killers. They are limited by pre-harvest intervals, but if you've got plenty of time, like you do right now in mid-July, you could still spray one of those if the problem was bad enough.
All right, Darren mentioned volunteer corn herbicides, but he didn't tell you how to use them to get the best results. What you need to do is, number one, you got to increase the rate, and number two, you've got to use crop oil at this late stage. If you don't do those two things, higher rate, use crop oil, don't expect good control. Okay, talking about the broadleaf herbicides, when you have broadleaves out in fields this late, there aren't many options. It's too late for Flex Star, it's too late for a lot of herbicides. Cobra is probably your best bet. Now, as I say that, understand with Cobra, you're going to drop some leaves off that plant most likely. To safeten the Cobra a little bit, we always used to suggest using some Solubor, like 1.25 pounds of Solubor. In other words, what they found is with adequate boron levels in the plant is able to recover more quickly from that Cobra. So you're not necessarily going to get any better weed control out of the Cobra with the boron in there, but you're definitely going to safeten that herbicide to those soybeans.
The other two herbicides that we do occasionally see used this late in the season, and both are actually labeled for corn and for soybeans, are Cadet and Resource. They're both excellent products for velvet leaf control, and actually velvet leaf has been on the rise the last few years. So if you do have a velvet leaf problem, believe it or not, Resource and Cadet are labeled up to 48-inch tall velvet leaf. Now, clearly we don't want to see velvet leaf get that tall, but if you do have an outbreak late in the season, these are products that could help you.
So once again, very late weed spraying in corn and soybeans is tough. If those weeds are huge, you're probably not going to get control, but if at least you can stop the weeds from going to seed, that hopefully is going to help you for the next few years.
Well, one other weed you may be concerned about is our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?